Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely pumped you're joining me today because we're about to dive into what is basically a masterclass on a really foundational question. How do we actually study the past, specifically philosophy's past? We're going to unpack the nuts and bolts of historical analysis step by step. I mean, have you ever picked up an ancient text and wondered, am I actually getting what this author meant, or am I just projecting my own modern baggage onto it? Like, reading a 2,000-year-old Stoic text as if it were some modern self-help blog. If that sounds familiar, you are in the exact right place. Okay, let's lay out our syllabus. All right, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll hit why studying philosophy's past even matters. Then, we'll dig into our three major historical lenses: the Presentist approach, the Contextualist approach, and the Hermeneutic approach. And finally, we'll wrap up with how to consciously choose your own historical lens. Let's jump right in. Section 1. Why study philosophy's past? You see, before we can master exactly how to study history, we really need to nail down why we're even doing it in the first place. So I want to toss this question directly over to you right off the bat. How should we study the history of philosophy? Think about it. When you read a text written hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago, do you bring your own unconscious biases into it? Look, it is totally human nature to read ancient wisdom and instantly try to fit it into our everyday modern lives. But is that really fair to the original author? Well, to figure out how scholars grapple with this exact tension, we first need to define our core discipline. And that discipline is called historiography. Basically, historiography is the study of how to conduct history. Think of it as the methodology of history. When we apply it to philosophy, it's all about asking ourselves what methods, what assumptions, what lenses are we actually using to interpret these past ideas. It gives us that solid academic grounding to make sure we aren't just making things up as we read along. So, with that definition safely in our tool belt, what's the actual tangible value of doing this work? Look, studying the past is absolutely not just about blowing the dust off old books for the sake of it. No way. It provides tremendous intrinsic and instrumental value. We literally get actionable arguments for the modern debates we're having today. Plus, we get to see the sheer, massive development of human thought across millennia. And frankly, it offers deep, profound inspiration from past wisdom that can legitimately guide our lives right now. It bridges that gap between abstract historical theory and our actual lived, practical experience. Okay, let's check out the first method scholars use to bridge that exact gap. Section 2, the Presentist approach. This is going to be the first of our three major lenses for historical interpretation. So the Presentist approach examines past philosophical texts specifically for the arguments they contain, judging whether they are relevant for us today. It essentially holds past thinkers to modern standards. Take this super famous quote from Edmund Burke, which was later powerfully restated by President JFK. "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." A presentist reads this and instantly pulls it right into our modern context to inspire present action. They hear this and go, wow, I need to go volunteer today. I need to donate to a cause. I have to take a stand right now. It's highly practical, very immediate. But, as you might guess, this approach definitely has a critical flaw. And that massive flaw is anachronism. See, when you hold past philosophers exclusively to our contemporary standards, and you're only looking for what benefits us right now, you commit anachronism. You completely ignore the vast differences in time, culture, and the specific circumstances that the original author was actually experiencing. By reading texts that narrowly, you end up with a profoundly ahistorical understanding of it. Basically, you strip the idea of its original meaning. So how do we fix that? Simple. We flip the lens. Section 3, the Contextualist approach. If the Presentist wants to know what history can do for us today, while the Contextualist wants to get the history right purely on its own terms. Let's look at a pretty striking real-life example, the biblical phrase, an eye for an eye. Now, an anachronistic, presentist view today often reads this as some barbaric justification for violence and revenge. But a contextualist? They understand that in the ancient Middle East, blood feuds between families could result in these endless, terrifying cycles of escalating extralegal violence. In that specific historical context, an eye for an eye was actually a radically progressive legal system meant to restrict retaliation. It literally meant you could not take more than an eye. It even set up monetary equivalents so people could avoid physical harm entirely. Just look at how understanding the context totally transforms the text. It goes from promoting violence to brilliantly preventing it. Pretty wild, right? Let's apply this to another super famous example, Plato's allegory of the cave. Usually, this is read as this abstract, floaty theory about reality and human knowledge. But wait, consider the actual history going on. Athens suffers a humiliating defeat by Sparta in the Peloponnesian War. Then Athens' democracy gets replaced by these wealthy, Spartan-sympathizing dictators known as the 30 Tyrants. And then those very tyrants execute Plato's beloved teacher, Socrates. When you know this context, wow, the allegory of the cave isn't just abstract metaphysics anymore. It is an urgent, direct political response to the sheer trauma of his time. Plato is desperately seeking a deeper truth to solve the deadly flaws he's witnessing in both tyranny and democracy. Context is literally everything. But is there a danger lurking here too? Yeah, there absolutely is. The danger of the contextualist approach is antiquarianism. This happens when historians get so totally lost in the historical weeds, hyper-focusing only on the fascinating little minutiae of ancient Athens or the Middle East, that they completely ignore why this philosophy holds any instrumental value for us today. They risk turning history into this isolated, dusty museum exhibit that's totally disconnected from modern life. Clearly, we need a middle ground.
Section 4, the hermeneutic approach. This is our third and honestly most nuanced lens. It aims to synthesize the best parts of the previous two methods.
The crucial point here is synthesis, historical context plus contemporary framework. You see, the hermeneutic approach takes the historical context incredibly seriously. It argues that no philosophical idea can really be understood if you rip it out of the historical process that generated it. But at the exact same time, it acknowledges a pretty humbling reality. We are human. We can never fully abandon our own modern perspective. Our interpretation of history is permanently, unavoidably conditioned by our contemporary context. So it becomes this dynamic dialogue between the past's reality and the present's perspective. However, the hermeneutic approach has its own dangerous little trap, and it's this arrogant tendency to view all of history as a neat, straight line that logically culminates perfectly in, well, us. A, then B, then C, then me. It assumes that all historical progression has this specific purpose leading right up to our brilliant modern worldview. We have to be incredibly careful not to assume that our contemporary perspective is the ultimate final goal of history. I mean, let's be real, future historians are eventually going to eclipse our viewpoint too, right? Section 5, choosing your historical lens. Let's move into our final section and bring all of these incredible concepts together so you can practically apply them. Okay, let's lay these three approaches side by side. The Presentist focuses on present questions, it gives us awesome access to past wisdom, but it totally falls into the trap of anachronism. The Contextualist, on the other hand, understands history purely on its own terms, wonderfully avoiding misinterpretation, but it risks antiquarianism, doing history just for history's sake. And finally, the hermeneutic approach blends past context with our modern frameworks, acknowledging a lasting value of texts, but it risks the absolute arrogance of assuming history is just a straight line culminating in the present. Seeing them laid out exactly like this lets you consciously decide which lens you are actually using at any given time. I want to end our explainer today with a really provocative question for you to ponder. Do you view history as a straight line culminating in the present, or as a complex, messy web of past contexts? The very next time you pick up a piece of historical philosophy, or hey, even just read a quote while you're scrolling through social media, I challenge you to stop and ask yourself, am I being a presentist, a contextualist, or a hermeneutic thinker right now? Because understanding your lens, that is the very first step to truly understanding the history of human thought. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and